the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast, episode 36. Once again, you find yourself caught in a bad meeting. As you glance at your watch, you're hoping it'll end quickly and put you out of your misery. Why? Little of value is being accomplished in this meeting. But how can you make sure this problem goes away? If you're in an organization, saying no may give you some individual or personal relief, but it does not solve the underlying issue. In fact, you're not sure anything will. Well, tune into this episode to hear from me and my special guest, Ben Kirk, as we tackle this wicked problem together. I'm Francis Wade, and welcome to the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast. And welcome back. As you can see, we're joined on the stage by Ben Kirk, who is our special guest. But before I introduce Ben, let me do a couple of things. One is to welcome you if you're new to the program and don't know what the heck you've dropped into. I'll do an explanation. Then we'll tell a quick story, and then I'll introduce Ben. So if you've never listened to our podcast, you may not know that it's very different from other kinds of podcasts where people are interviewed and book reports are given, and topics such as what are your favorite colors and your favorite TV show are the topic of discussion. Here on this podcast, we're all about solving a problem, and Ben and I have come up with a problem. It relates to meetings, and we're going to do our best to tackle the thorniest aspects of it, believing that as we discuss it, you'll gain some insights as we bring our knowledge and our experience to bear. So most of the show is really about defining the problem and diagnosing it. Einstein said that if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. So we're going to do that. And as we do so, we'll be looking to generate some insights that are unique, brand new, serendipitous, kind of a bit like being in a jazz combo, if you could imagine that. And as we do that, each insight, I'll make a note of it and put a little bell in that rings. You'll hear a bell. And if perchance we get to the end of the episode and we've not discovered any new insights, I'll play a buzzer, which means that time ran out. We had a good time, but we didn't have any new insights. So our objective is to come up with some new thinking. And let me tell a story about someone just to set the stage. Then I'll introduce Ben. So the story is about Christopher. Christopher has lots of good ideas. He keeps trying to preserve time each week to work on them. But guess what? He's a popular guy. Therefore, he keeps getting called into meetings by others. It's a kind of business where they schedule his meetings into his calendar using Outlook or Google Calendar, but they put the meetings in his calendar, and kind of thing is he can't really say no to them. They value his input and his willingness to share, but he can't continue very few of them. He can't continue that way because very few of them are well run. Most of them are run badly. So he ends up counting down the minutes as he sits in these meetings several times per day as these discussions drag on. And in those moments, all he can think about is a list of valuable tasks he could be working on instead. Things that he thinks will really move the needle. Fortunately, he ran into the CEO one day in the parking lot and suggested that there must be a better way to save hundreds of hours each week that people are spending collectively in the company in bad meetings. She got excited and asked him to write a memo with some practical suggestions. But guess what? He's in a bind. A lot of well-meaning people are calling these meetings with the best of intentions, but he hasn't really considered what a large-scale change program would look like, something the CEO could implement. So Ben Kirk, Ben's mission is to demystify the science of success and cut through the BS, fluff, and waffle of self-help with clear, actionable advice that will move the success needle for you. His mantra, do better, be better, win the day, sums up his philosophy of incremental self-improvement. No excuses, and a bias for action. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Great. Let's just jump right in. What do you make of the Christopher story and Christopher's situation?
Yeah, wow. I mean, who hasn't been in that situation before where you are just blocked up with meetings and you wonder how you're going to get any actual work done? Particularly when these meetings, there's no decisions are made by the end of them so many times. It's just people sitting around, maybe they're throwing ideas or have to do their brief or their report, and there's no actionable takeaways. There's no next steps. There's no what are we going to do? There's no chance to actually get some work done in those days. So yeah, let's tackle this. Let's solve this problem.
All right, great. So, as I mentioned before, the first part of our call is to diagnose the problem because there's not a single company I'm aware of that has its hand around the problem. So it tells us that it might seem to lend itself to some easy solutions, but there's some things going on here that are deeper than just behaviors, deeper than just putting in some rules, deeper than just social changes that need to happen. And we want to get to the bottom of it. And then as we do so, hopefully some answers will pop out that'll be brand new. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start by looking at what happens if the problem does never get solved. What happens if meetings continue to run amok in most companies?
Yeah, well, look, if we can push this forward 3 years, 5 years, even push it forward for a whole year. You start out the year, you think, what can we achieve this year? And then these issues with meetings are coming up further. What happens if next year is going to be exactly the same way? So, I mean, it's going to delay decisions. It's going to slow things down. What about innovation? There's morale in the company as well, right? Oh, crikey, we've got another year coming up. If it's going to be a repeat of this year, I don't know if I can cope.
Yeah, I would say also that any company that has let's say a strategy or a plan of any kind, any company can destroy their best intentions by simply having lots of ineffective meetings. Because the meetings are the glue to ensure that certain kinds of decisions are made and certain kinds of behaviors are initiated. And without them, you won't have that kind of movement, which means that you can kill any plan by simply having enough bad meetings. Does that kind of ring true?
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And then if you decide to cut away those meetings, then you've got no milestone reports, you've got no melding of minds, you've got no sort of other outcomes that can be produced either, which is, I mean, being human, we do like to be around other people. We do like to bounce ideas off other people. But if people don't want to be there, then it's just destroying the whole idea behind it. And
Right.
the companies moving forward are going to get stuck if people aren't wanting to attend, or they've already checked out even before they go in there. So just that whole idea, I mean, it's the products, it's the innovation, it's the morale. I mean, that's company growth slowing down. Maybe people are going to start jumping ship.
Right. Because they feel as if they're wasting their life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There are many cases of companies, like for example, Kodak comes to mind because Kodak had the right idea about digital photography in terms of the technology. They invented digital picture taking, digital cameras. They invented the digital camera, digital photography. And the guy who was the main inventor stayed with them the whole time that when they went out of business and film photography disappeared. And I imagine that he was in lots of meetings, right? And they never made the decisions that they needed to make to capitalize on what they had invented. And I imagine he sat there in these meetings, scratching his head and tearing his. I couldn't do that, but you could tear your hair out. Why is it that we're having all these meetings and we're talking about this, but nothing is happening? And as it came to crunch time in around 2003, So they had a record year in the year 2000. There was more film sold that year than ever before in the history of mankind.
Mm.
And 3 and 4 years later, they were starting to show the signs of being in trouble. And they weren't making the decisions that they needed to make to come out of regular film and go into digital technology. And as a result, by was it 2010 or 11, they were almost bankrupt, and they had
Yeah.
they were being supplanted by the iPhone and all smartphones. And eventually they destroyed some, I think it was some $20 billion in value, and 70,000 people lost their jobs. I read these awful numbers about these
Mm.
terrible things that happen. And I wonder, is it a result of not having these effective meetings and feeling as if probably this has always worked for us?
Yeah.
And when someone challenges the status quo in an unstructured way, if you don't have a good meeting, then that person never gets heard, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I think that was quite the point there about effective meetings. So it's quite possible that they were just having their standard meetings, going around the table, doing the standard presentation, doing the standard reports, the standard briefings, and maybe they weren't opening it up for people to be open-minded for innovation, to give this guy, this inventor, a chance to really explain his invention. Maybe they were just doing the standard thing over and over and over again, which is this sort of story that we hear about meetings. You seem like, well, hang on, we did this same meeting 2 weeks ago. We were covered over the same things. And maybe that's what happened to Kodak. I mean, I guess we can only suppose, but clearly they didn't take on any additional market knowledge or look at innovation or look where the market was moving. And they seriously lost that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, for sure, we know they didn't make the decisions, right? They needed to make.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
a given because they went
Yes.
out of business. Same with Blockbuster and BlackBerry and all the companies that we think of as. I saw these awful numbers around Yahoo. How companies tried to buy them and they said, "Oh no, we're better than that." And Google offered itself for sale to Yahoo for like 4 million, 5 million, some ridiculous number.
Yeah.
The numbers they were condensed in this one graphic. It just looked awful. And for a company like that to make these about 4 decisions they made that were terrible, you've got to think that there were some series of meetings, because nobody makes these decisions in a corporation on their own.
No,
so they had to meet.
Yeah.
So something happened or did not happen, and it had to happen or not happen in a meeting setting.
Yeah.
So there could have been some lead up, but for sure we know that critical decisions weren't made, and those decisions had to be made or not made in meetings, and that destroyed 6 billion, I think, of value in Yahoo. Again, some crazy number.
Yeah.
But for all these failures, I've got to think that there's a series of bad decisions which came from a sequence of bad meetings. Must have contributed to it. Just if you look at the way organizations work, or am I exaggerating? What do you think?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think so many organizations get into this BAU, just this is the standard thing that we do. We do these meetings for an hour. We do them every Monday at 10 o'clock. These are the standard people that always come into these meetings, and they get into this sort of BAU system. And I think that when we get locked into, and hey, I'm all about routines. I'm all about habits. I think they're really important. I'm all about SOPs. I think we need to have these things to leverage from. But these sort of meetings are going to need to have something else incorporated to try to break them out of this standard decision-making mold, or, as the case may well be, non-decision-making mold. And I think, going into this BAU, sometimes they need to have something scheduled in that's going to shake stuff up. And maybe it's taking that 3-hour meeting down to 1 hour, or it's taking that 1 hour meeting down to 15 minutes and just saying, hey, let's just come to some really quick conclusions here, and see what comes out of it. Maybe they need to work at making jazz a bit more and bouncing ideas around the room a bit more, having that innovation, finding those sort of killer questions that might be able to have them think about things from another angle or another perspective. But if people are in this routine of a standard meeting and a standard format and a standard agenda and the standard speakers, then they're never going to get that chance for new types of decisions or making better decisions or innovation.
Yeah, I wonder also how many wars were started because of some really bad meetings, you know, or, or how many conflicts there are in the world because there was a really, really stupid, again, as you said, routine meeting where one person did all the talking and he or she just talked himself into a conflict that was unnecessary. And before you knew it, the tanks were rolling and, what? We have a war? That this is what happens when meetings aren't done well. Human beings don't work well together.
Yeah.
And the manifestation of it is these bad meetings. Okay. So when people realize that meetings need to be improved and that there's something basic going on, the building block of making decisions isn't working well, which would say is a meeting. What do people typically do to try to solve the problem? What are some of the things that folks do to avoid get themselves out of trouble?
Yeah, I think some people will go down the line initially of making sure there's a really fixed agenda. I think a lot of people say, okay, here is the agenda that we need to go through. Our last meeting, we went off on a tangent and someone spoke more than their allocated 5 minutes and they did 10 minutes and that threw the whole meeting out of whack. And then our 1 hour meeting, we got to 55 minutes. We hadn't round things up. We hadn't made any decisions yet. So let's make sure we have an agenda and it needs to be fixed and we can only speak for 5 minutes. That is one potential solution. But I mean, I think we can find there's probably a lot of problems in that as well in itself, right? But I think that's one way that people will try to square away their meetings and
make them really rigid.
I guess outcomes. Yeah.
Kind of super military, huh?
Yeah, so well, yeah. I mean, I would even doubt that that military meetings would even be run some of the ways we see these fixed agendas. I think there's always got to be this element that you've got to have of adaptability and be ready for the something to be thrown at you sideways. But yeah, these sort of super fixed agendas I've been part of, where things are counted down to the minute of how long we have to speak, and yeah. There's certainly going to be a lot of problems there, but I think it's the first point of call that people make. So let's lock this down.
And then there's some folks who say that I have too many meetings, so let me just avoid them. So they just say no to all their meetings, which means that the decisions are made without them, right?
Yeah, I mean, and what if they are actually a decision maker who needed to be there, or that sort of affected their particular department, or something like that. But yeah, and I mean, just avoiding meetings, that's part of, I mean, that can start talking to someone's ego. And I mean, what's that going to say about morale as well? Is that, hey, this guy reckons he's too good for us he's too busy for us to avoid meetings. And that may not necessarily be their mindset. They are just absolutely overworked and they can't get that project to be released on time if they keep going to all these meetings. So they're just going to cut away from them. But that's not going to work either.
So it's almost as if we're saying that the simplistic kind of answers don't really work. The do away with them, make them rigid. Leaving meetings early doesn't work because same problem as not showing up. Being in a meeting, while you're checking your mail and you're playing with your.
Well, that's a huge thing. This work from home and all the digital meetings, right? Is that I bet you most people are multitasking while they're doing meetings, unless they're having a conversation like we are back and forth, while you're waiting for 5 or 6 other people to speak. Most people are going to be checking their phone or checking their emails or doing something else, jump off camera and go do the dishes while they're at home or something, right? So that's just talking, that's huge disengagement.
Right. right. And it takes away from the likelihood that the meeting will be effective in
Mm.
accomplishing its goal. And maybe
Yeah,
that's
could be.
maybe that's the twin targets that we want. We want effectiveness and we want efficiency in the sense that the meeting should take the exact number of minutes that is required and kind of like no more or no less. What
Mm.
does that
Mm.
what does that kind of it's kind of sounding to me like that's maybe a sweet spot. The right accomplishment in exactly the
Yep.
right time.
Yep.
I guess I would add
The right
also maybe
decision
the right
made,
people.
right accomplishment in the right time, the right amount of engagement. I guess that all goes into it. Was it Parkinson's law where it
Right.
was the task that you're doing is going to take as long as the time you allocate to it?
Right. I think meetings are the same way.
Yeah.
Why doesn't a 1 hour meeting take an hour? That's the whole reason for that. Because we're
Exactly.
lucky. No,
Yeah.
because there's fucking Parkinson's law that people are watching the clock and they're realizing I don't want to be here for more than the hour. So in the
Mm.
last
Mm.
how many minutes they arrive at all these decisions, and it's a
Yep.
it's a it's a sense in which I think people come into meetings, and if you don't have the right kind of mindset coming in, which is shortest time as possible, effective in producing the results we need to produce, which means that somebody has to do the work before to define the result that we want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right people in the room. That if the right blend isn't there, then we'll end up with having these bad meetings and ruining world peace and profits and innovation as a result of it. Right? It's like that's the
Yeah.
equation. It's like it's this delicate creation, human creation that is
Mm.
not very robust. It's sort of there's a million ways to mess it up, and if you
Yeah.
don't pay attention to all these different things, then you're all of a sudden you're in a 3 hour meeting,
Yeah.
or all of a sudden there's twice as many people who are there who should be there.
Yep.
You know,
But and that's
you have
really easy to do with these online meetings, isn't it? These online
Mhm.
meetings where, it might only take 5 people, but hey, you know what? We've got a really, really big room when we're doing an online meeting. Let's just invite everybody.
Right,
And
right.
that's,
We
I'm
because we
sure
can.
that is what happens as well. So why am I CC'd on this email? It's like, why am I getting an invite to this meeting? And I know some meeting invites are say, okay, these people don't have to attend, but these people it's mandatory to attend. I've certainly seen some invites like that. But yeah, they can just invite more and more people now.
Right, right, and they just get added on, and that's another
Yeah.
way to. And some people think. I remember when I used to work in corporate world, there were some people who used to bring their as many people as they could to the meeting because that was like a show of force. That was their backup or their security blankie or some, whatever it was, right? But
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
5 people from this department. What are they doing in the meeting? I don't know. They're here to show support. They're
Yeah.
here to do what? What kind of meeting is this? And you're back to, but we don't produce the outcomes. And
Yeah.
the sense I have is that companies they suffer the mal effects of bad meetings, but they don't know what to do about it. Sorry, they have an
Yeah.
idea what to do about it, but they don't implement it in a way that has it work. So they
Yeah.
try
I
these
I
different things that we're
really wonder
talking
if they're
about.
asking the
And
question.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. I actually wonder to ask the question, do we need to have this meeting for 1 hour? Do we even need to have this meeting? I
At
wonder if
all.
they're even asking that question.
Yeah. You remember these stories of Steve Jobs looking around the room and then saying, "You don't need to be here. You don't need to be here. You don't need to be here.
Yep.
What's your name again? You don't need to be here." And he would
Yep.
just, it sounds bad. Like he would decimate the room and you'd be left with 3 people having the meeting as opposed to the 12 that showed up.
Yeah.
But, in a way, he was like carving away the noise from the signal, right? He was
Yeah.
carving away the all the ways in which it could go wrong. to try to
Yep.
make it go right.
And he
And
was also
my
about productivity as well. And I mean, these people can certainly be out there working. I mean that, and that's how he developed his computers. He cut away all the stuff that didn't require to be there. That's the way they built their operating system. This is the way
right,
they did the iPhones. It was
right,
always about saying no to things, cutting things away, and getting just to those core elements. And yeah, those stories about his meetings were absolute classics. You don't need to be here. You don't need to be here. Out you go.
yeah.
Go back to work or find something new to do, be innovative somewhere else. I just
Hmm.
need to have these people here. So,
Go,
and
do,
hey,
go
fair to
create
say, it
value
worked.
somewhere else. Like
Yeah,
Christopher,
yeah, exactly.
go
Yeah,
create value.
yeah,
Don't be constrained to this, because this is not the best use of your time. You're a highly paid professional and you're a bright person, and sitting around
yeah,
listening while we dot the i's and cross the t's about a matter in which you're peripherally involved.
yeah.
But you know
I mean,
what
that also sounds like respect. He has respect for their time as well. So some people might say, "Oh, he was this guy, and he told us to go and wouldn't let us be part of the meetings." But no, actually, he was being respectful because he didn't want you to waste your time sitting here, not getting an opportunity to say something, not getting an opportunity to deliver value. Go deliver value elsewhere. I think that was respect. And I
it's
think
interesting.
people can be better with their meetings and respecting other people's time. I think that's a big part of this.
Interesting way of looking at it, which is that it's a matter of respect. Because if you have 10 people in a meeting for 10 people in an hour meeting,
Mm.
that's 600 minutes. 610, yeah, 600
Yeah.
minutes
Yep.
of of I was going to say respectful time, but 600 minutes of respect that you now need to preserve.
Mm.
And if you can get
Yes.
the 600 down to 300, you're moving it in the right direction.
That's right.
Let's,
Yep.
let's call them respect minutes, I don't know, something like
Yeah.
that. But it seems, I tell you what I like about the metric is that it makes you pay attention
Mm.
all of a sudden to the idea of respect, which seems to be like an ethos that he brought to the table,
Mm.
and the idea of every minute
Yeah.
and the total number of
Yep.
minutes. 600 minutes of possible respect or disrespect,
Yep. Yep.
because
And
you have to spend,
it brings
you
another
have to
meaning
spend
to
zero.
watching the clock. Yeah.
Say that again,
Yeah.
Ben.
Oh, it's kind of like it brings a new meaning to watching the clock as well. Rather than just watch a clock of the time ticking away, we can be watching the clock of the amount of minutes that we're saving in the meeting, or the amount of respect minutes, or actually some other
Right,
sort of metrics that we can be tracking, rather than just that bored look at the clock and watching time slowly tick away and wondering, what am I doing here?
right. Because it's funny you say that, because when we're caught in those meetings, I think the feeling can be one of disrespect when you're on the receiving end, like Christopher in those meetings,
Mm.
or when we've been in those meetings, the word disrespect seems to ring true for me in terms of how I felt when I
Yeah.
see the thing going south. It's like
Yep.
some way in which my 60 minutes of those 600 are not being respected. Maybe it should be zero,
Mm.
or maybe it should be 45 of my minutes or 30 of my minutes.
That's right.
But somewhere in there, it becomes a feeling on the giving end of my time is not being respected. You've been to meetings where which always start late,
Mm. Mm. Yep.
and you just kind of, inside you're like your gears are grinding, right?
Yeah.
And the
Spending
person who
five
calls
five
you,
minutes for people to attend the meeting, to actually come in there, get settled, and I forgot my coffee, and going back out, grabbing the coffee, and coming back in, and although those delayed meeting starts as well, right? That's a whole nother
and
part of it. And then, of course, other people that are normally on time start coming later as well. Like, oh, well, the meetings actually don't start till 5 past, so
everybody
we're
joins
going
in
to
the
come at
fun.
5 past, and then everything gets pushed. But I
And
think
if
on the
you're
flip
the
side
guy
as
who
well,
shows
though,
up on time,
yeah,
if you're the guy who shows up on time,
yeah,
and the meeting convener is the last one to show up, that's like the ultimate disrespect. It's
yeah,
right at the beginning of the meeting. because
Yeah.
you've busted your butt to be there on time, and he or she just starts the meeting on a disrespectful note.
Yeah. It can certainly go that way. I was just thinking before though, is that some meetings are maybe they could be termed something different as well. When we've got a meeting that's more like a briefing. So sometimes we have people that there's an important announcement to be made, or something needs to be shared, not discussed, to be shared, but it needs to be a closed room. So okay, we need to get these 20 key people in here because we've got something coming up that we need to share with you guys behind closed doors. And so
Oh, okay.
that's sort of like a briefing or a sharing point where there's not a lot of interaction. People are in there, they're now listening, you're being told something. We don't need to get a decision here because I'm literally telling you this is what's occurred and this is what needs to occur, or this is going to be launched coming up, we're going to IPO, or John from accounting just got found for pilfering millions. This is now a closed room discussion. We don't need to make any decisions, but we are now briefing you on what's occurred. But
That
maybe
sounds like a
those
WhatsApp.
meetings could be called that before you go in, to say what you're
That sounds like
expecting
a
and what to
WhatsApp
expect.
text, though, Ben.
Yeah, we've
Maybe. Well, on the extreme end, to
mm,
bring all those people physically together into meeting, it's
yeah.
got to be big, like
Oh,
CEO
it
being
would have to
fired,
be. Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
big.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
and even then,
Otherwise, there's an email, isn't there? I mean, some things you don't necessarily want to put in writing. I'm just trying to think about why are there sometimes meetings that you just go there, they feel like a briefing of something that could have just been sent in an email,
yeah,
because that's
or
sometimes
or
that's just a one way conversation, right? Send
or text
the
message.
briefing out in an email or something. But there are on the extreme side, yes, cases where there may want to be some sort of meeting, but I think that should be retermed as a briefing or retermed as something like that, so people don't go in there expecting that okay, we're going to have a chance to make some conclusions, make some decisions. No, we're going to sit here and we're going to get a briefing for 30 minutes, and that's what it is.
And that's all it is. And it
Yeah,
can't happen. It can't happen by text message because of the nature of the issue.
yeah.
That
But at
goes
the
to the
same time, it
outcome of
shouldn't
the
happen every
meeting.
week either.
Right, right. And it goes to the outcome, right? Which is
Yeah,
when the person has thought through the outcome, then they don't have a regular meeting for an hour when
yeah,
15 minutes would suffice because they're thinking about the outcome, what they want to
yep,
accomplish,
yep,
and and to combine what we've said before, which I'm going to say is our first insight, which is one about disrespect, is that
yeah,
every minute I extract from you is is and if I don't do it well, is a minute of disrespect. So every
mm,
minute. So I need to match the purpose of the meeting and then the number of minutes to be the minimum
yeah,
so that
yeah,
I'm accomplishing the result with the least or with the maximum respect. Let's call it that. The
yes,
most respect.
that's good.
Respecting your time is like the main, and when I don't respect your time, I fall
Mm,
into the disrespect bucket.
yeah,
It's either one or the other. It's not, there's no middle ground of, and I think maybe this is why the problem hasn't been really solved yet, is because people don't see meetings as a matter of respect. They see it as a matter of time.
yes,
I
certainly.
remember, someone canceling a meeting, canceling meetings with that uh, she had with me.
Mm,
And I think when I discussed it with her, she said, "Well, I assume that you just have other things to do, and that this frees up your time to cancel the
yeah,
meeting." And I
okay,
said,
cool, cool.
"Not quite." And I explained to her that, let's say the meeting came at around early lunchtime. I'm actually delaying my lunch every time, which means I can't go out with my colleagues. I
Mm,
can't I usually have lunch with my wife. So I can't do that. And I'm
yeah,
not doing that in order to be ready for this meeting. So when
yeah,
you cancel the meeting, it's not just that I have free time, especially at the last minute you're canceling it. It's
Yeah.
that I've put away other things so that I could focus on this.
Yeah.
So it's actually costing me something that you're not seeing because you're not seeing this as a matter of respect.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the key questions that a meeting convener needs to be asking themselves. And I mean, it comes out of that outcome part of it as well, is that, do we need to have a meeting to achieve this? Clearly, if this person's been cancelling that meeting with you, they've realized that, well, maybe I could have just sent an email, or maybe we could have just had a chat around the water cooler or something. We didn't need to actually have a scheduled meeting. Maybe they realized that, and that's why they cancelled it. Okay, great. Thanks for cancelling it. I can see there's a positive to that, but we really should have come to that realization point when we convened the meeting and sent that invite 2 days earlier or a week earlier or something like that as well. So we need to really get outcome focused from our meetings, and we need to think about, as part of the framing for being outcome focused, we need to think about the respect part of it. Is, am I respecting these people's time? Am I going to make them have to work an hour longer tonight because of this meeting, that they're not going to be going home and having dinner with their family?
Right. And the lack of that kind of consideration, that level of empathy, maybe
Sure.
leads people to like not show up to meetings. So I've
Yes.
been, I remember I was a member of a board of an organization, and for a year I was the only person that showed up to all the meetings. And I had this feeling like I was the idiot, right?
Yeah.
I was the dumb. Show up when I'm sick and everything. Show up, and after I show up, the meeting gets cancelled because not enough people are there. Oh, we don't have a quorum,
Yeah.
so oh well. So I jumped off of that board. I jumped off of that board and said, "No, the level of incompetence, yes, and disrespect was just so high that I couldn't wait to get off. I couldn't wait to rid myself of it. And it was
Yeah.
just because all great people, all well-meaning people, nice people, funny, all no problem with when they're in person. But
Yeah.
something allowed them to ruin the meeting and not be responsible for its impact. Some way in which they held the meeting, the mental model of the meeting was maybe for them. Oh, other people would pick up the slack. There's other ways we let ourselves off the hook with these things.
Sure.
Other people will show up and other people will play their part, or they don't really need me, or I think it's better for me to save an hour over here and I'll go do this instead. So I need to I need to take care of my business before I take care. There's all these, call them excuses or rationales that people come up with that allow the behavior to persist, because it's like the way they've constructed their 60-minute attendance at the meeting, or the way the convener has set up the 600 minutes of respect. It's not 600 minutes of respect. It's an hour out of my schedule.
Yeah. I was just thinking of something there as well when it comes to those board meetings. I mean, because often it's a lot. Certainly in my town, a lot of people that are on the same sort of boards. I've had the situation where we're not able to make the board meeting or make the meeting. I've caught up with one of the guys for a coffee the next day. He's downloaded to me what happened in that meeting in about 5 minutes, about 10 minutes. Oh, we've got a couple of open action items. Okay, cool. Let's discuss that. One of them's on my plate, one of them's on your plate. Discuss it, bang, done. We've had a coffee, meetings, debriefed in 5 minutes, we've made some decisions. It's like, well, then why am I going to continue to go to these board meetings if we're able to get a decision like that over coffee the next day. So yeah, it's quite possible that these people in this board meeting or there were thinking the same sort of thing as well. So well, we're not really going to come to anything, and we all know that the business gets made on the side anyway, or over a coffee or something like that. This is just that, attendance of once a month you need to be going to this particular meeting, or and that's going back to the whole BAU thing of just like, this is what we have to, this is what we do. This is what we do. It's once a month. We have this meeting. It goes for an hour. We have this agenda, and we go around the table like this.
And everyone is mutually unconscious about the about the impact on the other folks who are, because this is it's a social event. It's a social commitment, right? It's always a social commitment involving other people. So that's the nature of a meeting by definition. This is not a solo activity.
No,
it
has
to be
we
done
need
with
that.
other people.
Yeah,
but we behave like that, right?
Yeah, we need that. We need those third party views. We can't just continue to try to make decisions and go things on our own, because we've only got our perspective. We need to have these other people's perspective, the third person view, someone who's had a bit of a different life that might be able to bring some other ideas, or even just from the side of that. Okay, they're from the finance department. They're going to have some other ways at looking at this crazy idea that I've got. Marketing might have something else. Sales might have something else. Product development may have something else. But in general, as a human species, we require to have other people around us.
Right.
But we're killing that. We're killing that by these meetings.
Right. We destroy the possibility of that by doing what we're doing at scale.
Yeah. And that scale, and that goes back a little bit when we're talking about the metrics there, with those counting the minutes, and are they respectful minutes or disrespectful minutes? But there's a lot of other ways that we can have metrics in meetings that can track how effective that meeting is. And I mean, and of course we can take that to the nth degree and be too rigid, like the too rigid agendas, but being super rigid on our meeting metric tracking. But I mean, there's side things that we can track how many decisions were made during the meeting. What was the value of those decisions that were made during the meeting? So there's a whole lot of other areas that we can start to incorporate into there as well with the metrics. And yeah, I do like the disrespect metric as well. Maybe we need like a big scoreboard. In all of our meeting rooms, we need this large scoreboard that's got respectful minutes. It's got time saved by cutting this meeting 10 minutes shorter. This is the time saved, or over time. Maybe at the beginning of the year, our meetings were 3 hours long. By the end of the year, we've got our meetings down to 1 hour long, and we've saved this amount of meeting minutes and hours and time, etc. Big like scoreboard.
And maybe that's a reason why this problem keeps going on and on and on, because we're not trying to be more respectful as time goes on. We're not trying to maximize respect and minimize disrespect. Now we're not trying to improve our meetings full stop. Say again?
We're not trying to improve our meetings full stop.
No, we're just trying to put up with them.
Yeah.
We're just trying to survive them, right?
And trying to survive them.
Because if we were, think of the statistics that we collect in sports. When we're serious about improving things, we have analytics. Like, and you see, you're a cricket person, you know the sport.
Yeah.
People go crazy in sports like cricket and baseball, where there's lots of statistics.
Yeah.
And they play the game of measurement as almost as hard as they play on the field, because they know that making these small adjustments produces results.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we have no problem in those worlds of measuring a heck of a lot of stuff. But when it comes to meetings, I've never seen a company boast that we are spending 25% less time in meetings this year than last. And we're maintaining the same level of communication and the same level of results.
No, I've not seen that anywhere. I mean, the odd Peter Trucker quote was it, Dave? If it can't be measured, it can't be managed. I mean, we're talking about
Right.
managing meetings, right? And yeah, that would be an ideal measurement for companies to see how efficient they're becoming from these meetings, particularly if they've got, an all staff meeting with 800 staff or something like that as well, right? But just through the course of the year, if they can just measure the outcomes, just measure the efficiencies, um, that would be interesting. And maybe there are companies out there that are doing it. I haven't been a part of them, and I haven't seen it.
I've never seen a study, and I've never seen anyone boast. I've never seen
No,
it in advertising that says that we're a great company. Every year we
no,
spend 5% less time in meetings and we
yeah,
produce the same results, even though we're doing that.
yep,
I've never even heard an intention. Now, this is
no,
shocking. Let alone a result. I've never
yeah.
seen a company announce that this year we are going to,
Yeah,
because
I'm sure
the
wouldn't that make a great LinkedIn post? I mean, you see a lot of things that are getting boasted about on LinkedIn, right? And the way that those messages are shaped, and or maybe it's the humble brag or the boast. Yeah,
right,
wouldn't that be great to start seeing some LinkedIn posts with like, we have cut down our meeting time, we've increased efficiency, something like that, boasting about that.
right,
That'll be a platform
right.
that would be able to see it if it was there.
Because we know how to measure stuff when we care, right? Because in sports we really care a
Mm,
lot, so we measure everything, right?
mm.
In disciplines like finance, we care a lot about where that money ends up going, so we measure
Yeah,
everything, right?
yeah.
Even in continuous improvement, TQM, just in time, lean, whatever you call it, Six Sigma.
Mhm. Yep.
In that world, it became important to measure certain things because there was a direct link to the bottom line between quality
Mm.
and measured in different ways, process quality, different kinds of quality, and the bottom line.
Yep.
So all of a sudden it became important to measure them. So in our lifetime, there were no measurements when we were born, and today they measure everything in that world. It became important.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why
And we
not
talk about that
meetings?
that world as well. So I mean, we have the agile method, right? And they started to have different types of meetings. The agile
Right,
started bringing in that stand up meeting, and I'm sure there's listeners
right,
out there thinking like, hang on a sec, we've got this agile methodology. We're working in the IT development space, or software development or something like that. We work in agile. Okay, great. That is one solution that we're starting to see that works very well for specific industries and specific
in a
levels
particular
that you are
project.
within that industry as well. So that we're
Right,
not exactly frontline, but that's definitely incorporating in sort of the front line of the development side. So yes, there are things like agile, stand-up meetings, Scrum, that sort of stuff, which has been very effective. What can we take out of that? And I'm certainly no expert in that, but what can we
right.
take out of that we can start applying to these other more, what can I say, slow, plodding executive meeting. I mean, and that's kind of what I got in my head here. I've got executive
Right.
meetings in my head, really.
Sure, sure. But it's true, it's true across the board. And probably maybe the worst ones are the ones lower down where there's less rigor and there's less impatience. They're
Yeah,
more
yeah,
forgiving, there's less feedback, there's way more minutes at stake the further down
yeah,
you go in an organization. There you get
potentially.
meetings of 30, 40, and 50 people that just go on forever. And the amount of respect minutes plummets and the
Yeah.
disrespect minutes fly up.
And just think
So
about the
maybe
amount
it's
of
even worse.
time of money. So the amount of money spent on those meetings. If you've got 50 people going to a meeting for an hour, and let's just say the hourly rate is around $20 an hour.
Mhm.
So now we've got that meeting is now $1,000. And $20 an hour isn't a lot if you're in a professional space. I mean, that could be as high as $100 an hour. So now all of a sudden we're talking about a $5,000 meeting with just 50 people there. If that convener was to think, hey, is this meeting going to be worth $5,000? Are the outcomes we're going to get here? Is it going to be worth that $5,000? But that's only 50 people a meeting. What happens if you're calling 500 people to a meeting with the average um, average salary of $50 an hour.
We see this is interesting, right? Because that metric has been around forever, and I've never been
Mm,
in a meeting where it was used in real time. I've heard of
mm,
companies that put a clock on the wall and translate
yeah,
the minutes into hours. I've heard of it, but I've never heard a first-hand account where someone says, "Oh, yeah, I belong to a company," and in every meeting there's a calculator on the wall that adds up the dollars and cents of the time that's being spent in real time, and
yeah.
our job is to get that number, keep that number as low as possible. I've never heard this, and we're talking basic. This is not rocket science. Tell me if
No,
I'm wrong, Ben, but
no,
that's not
no,
rocket science to do
no.
that. But have you heard of any companies that actually do it as opposed to in theory could do it?
No, I haven't, but I'm getting some great business ideas here. I'm thinking about making digital scoreboards like a basketball scoreboard or something that we can start shipping to companies, and we just have to plug in the data. Average wage of this sort of segment of this department here. Okay, input that in. Press start, and maybe even got some buttons on the scoreboard, which when you come to a decision, you press the button and bing, it goes up there. Okay, team A has got one point on the board or something. I'm just yeah, okay.
But I,
I'm
I
trying to be
wonder,
innovative here,
right?
but yeah,
I've got to think that we're not the first to think of this.
no,
Because, I mean, we're bright guys, right? But this is not this is not that
no. This
revolutionary
this is
in the
this
scheme of
discussion's been had
things.
before, I'm sure. Yeah.
But how come no one's doing it?
Mm,
This is maybe the crux of this whole thing is that we're talking about common problems exist everywhere. We're talking
yeah.
about cheap solutions. None of these is expensive. We're
No.
talking about technology that's already existing, been around
Mm,
forever,
mm,
and yet, and we're talking about an issue that everyone says they hate. No
yeah.
one wants to be in those meetings that Christopher has been in, from our
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
But there's some, and I have a hypothesis.
Mhm.
It's we're still not in solutions yet, but this is kind of like,
Yeah.
why is that proposed idea, why hasn't it gotten off the design board or off the drawing board?
Mm, mm,
I wonder if it's because dollars and cents aren't enough in the moment to move someone's behavior, that everyone is wasting money so in these meetings, so they're wasting their their fair share also, so they don't there's
yeah.
no immediate impact on them. And when we said the business about the respect and the disrespect,
Mm,
so what if there were, maybe not real time, because that's, you've seen these debates, presidential debates,
yeah.
they do that, they give each person a dial, and
Yes.
as each debater makes a point, they turn it up or they turn it down. So I
Mhm.
imagine that's too much for a meeting in which you're participating. You don't want to, disrespect has
Yeah.
gone up. But at the very least, right, at the very end of the meeting, before you walk out of the door, you could give feedback.
Yes.
But again, I've not been in a company, not a single, I've never heard of it even, where
Yeah.
companies give, you take out your smartphone, and we all have them, right? And you give
Yeah.
immediate, it take you 2 minutes,
Yeah.
disrespect, respect, and you give the person, if not real time, then 1 minute later feedback on the quality of what you just went through from in these.
Mm,
The thing about the respect is it gives an emotional tie-in that maybe the dollars doesn't give you. It tells you, because nobody
mm.
wants to be known as that guy who disrespects other people's time. Nobody wants
No, no, that's right.
it.
No.
You prefer to be that guy who wastes meeting time because everybody does that, or that guy who wastes money because everybody does that. But
Yeah.
to be the one who disrespects people and disrespects
Yeah.
their time is, that's more painful. So maybe if it became a matter of that, in addition to the
Yes.
dollars and cents, in addition to the time, but
Yeah.
maybe that needs to be the missing element that makes
That's
it
right.
personal, as opposed to
Yeah.
just kind of, at this point, the dollars and cents and the time are kind of
Mm.
true but theoretical. So you need them,
Yeah.
but maybe they've not been enough to change behavior. What do you think? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think that certain people will respond to certain things more than others. So some people will get really antsy about their time. Some people might be the bean counters that are really, really antsy about the money, and some people that are probably over the top are concerned about respect. I think that if we can hit in multiple different areas, what speaks to what speaks to what person. And some people might just be completely happy that they're in there with a bunch of other people and people are talking and having fun. They're like, well, I don't even care. This is my happy place. But I think disrespect cuts through a lot of that, and I think that comes through because that is one of our general human needs, right? Or was it the hierarchy of needs? That's certainly in there. So perhaps that is something that can be tracked, communicated, discussed, talked about. And when you're saying about people responding on the phone, I'm not sure if you have them where you are, but there's service stations here, gas stations.
Gas station.
As you walk, as you walk out, there's these little tabletops or little, and they've got little buzzers, not so buzzers on little buttons on them. You got the reds, you've got the oranges, and the green. It's like, how do you rate your service today? And as you walk out the door, you
Oh
just smash one of the
yeah.
buttons, right? You got your green, you got your red, you got your yellow. Maybe it's a smiley face, maybe it's a frowny face, something like that. And as you walk out, you can just hit that button as you walk out, and that gives some tracking and some feedback. Imagine having that in your physical meeting rooms, that whenever everyone walks out, they smack one of these buttons. That it depends on how they felt about the respect level in, well, no, and it's not actually so much about the respect level in the meeting, because people can say, oh, you didn't respect me in the way that we had that discussion.
Right. It's
That's
not
not
that
the
thing,
respect we're
right?
talking about. We're
No,
talking
that's not
about
what
the
we're talking about.
respectfulness of time, of
Right.
someone's time. So yeah, we'd
Right.
have something on there. Do you feel that your time was well spent, or that the
Right.
convener respected your time and it was well spent in this meeting? And you've got the smiley face, the neutral face, and the frowny face,
Right.
or
Right.
maybe
But I
it's the
like the
face with
idea
the steam
of
coming out the ears.
right. I know we're into solutions now, which is just about the right time
Oh,
for us to,
yep.
which is good, right? But I like the idea of forcing a choice between respect and disrespect. Like
Mm,
you get like at the beginning of a meeting, it's 50-50. Fifty
mm-hmm,
percent respect and 50% disrespect. And
mm-hmm.
as the meeting goes along, as the minutes are spent, you
Yeah.
either increase disrespect at the expense of respect or vice versa.
Yes.
So there's
Yep.
there's no middle neutral kind of ground, because a minute
Okay.
that's not
Yep.
respected is not a neutral minute. It becomes a demerit. It becomes a disrespectful minute. So it's either one or
Sure.
the other, but there's no middle, because
Yeah.
otherwise people will just gravitate towards this middle kind of vague
Mm,
mushmash, which is
mm.
what happens today in most meetings. It's kind of a, how was the meeting? You know, was
Yeah.
it bad?
Yeah.
Was it good?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's not, you're not forcing people to make a hard choice that they actually may feel, but they wouldn't express because you put the question to them in that way. So
Mm.
I like the idea of it being one or the other. That
Yeah.
60
Yeah. Okay.
minutes,
Yeah.
30 minutes of what, 30 minutes of the other. And then
Mm.
maybe you might move the needle in the right direction, and maybe it'll go in the wrong direction. But at the
Yeah.
very least, you get some very clear feedback at the end that,
Yeah.
oh, I arrived 10 minutes late. So that's 10 minutes of disrespect. So I started off with that.
Mm-hmm.
I started off consuming my respect. I
Yep.
barely got it back to halfway. And that's why I ended up with a score that was just in the middle.
Yeah.
So you can
Yep.
actually trace it back to some behaviors. But I like the idea of it being either or, but nothing else but those
But
two.
nothing else. Yeah. It's kind of
Yeah.
like when you do a ranking, you remove the 7 out of 10 when you have a survey or something, because everyone wants to go for the 7. It's
Right.
either the 6 or the 8. I was
Right.
just thinking about that though.
You're
With
forced
the
a choice.
Yeah, yeah. Give us an answer either way. Um, we were talking a bit before about 30 minutes and 60 minutes. I don't think we've really discussed why so many meetings are generally 60 minutes. They always seem to be
But
that 60
Outlook has
minutes
it as a
starting on the
default.
hour, finishing on the hour.
Outlook has it as a default.
Yeah.
And
That can't be
and
the
as you
only
said,
reason. Oh my gosh.
it's probably that. But I have somewhere along the line I set up my Google Calendar so it doesn't set up 1 hour meetings. It set up 55-minute meetings. And I don't remember
Yeah.
why I did it that way. I read it somewhere that doing that does something. But
Yeah.
it actually does something, when I set the meeting up, because it forces me to think through, okay, how long do I need really? Is it less
Yeah,
than an
exactly.
hour? Because it's never exactly an hour, right?
Yeah.
The other
Yeah.
thing, the other reason I like your question is because it's let's imagine that you and I start off the first quarter we have 1 hour meetings, and then we both agree that they're too long, right?
Yeah.
And then we say, okay, we don't need that amount of time. How much time do we really need per per quarter? And we
Mm.
say, well, it's less than an hour, but not 50 minutes, maybe 53 minutes. Okay, 53-minute meetings,
Yeah.
because we see ourselves on an improvement path
Yeah.
in which the difference between 55 and 53 means that we're moving towards 50.
Yeah.
So it gives us an idea of which way the needle is going. If it goes up to 54 next year, then we know that we're going in the wrong direction.
Mm.
But
Mm.
but using these odd numbers can
Yeah.
direct your attention towards, are you getting better or worse? I don't know.
Yeah, and
What do you
certainly
think?
starting a meeting at an odd time as well. Um, it was about a year ago that I looked at the coaching industry, and I used to do 1 hour coaching sessions or 1.5 hour coaching sessions, and I had a look at those meetings, and whilst I am educating during those calls, it was the last sort of 10, 15 minutes of these coaching sessions that we were starting to get major breakthroughs, or actually decisions were going to be made about the next steps that they're going to take. What are the next steps we're going to take this week? But because it was 1 hour, we were doing it every fortnight, or we were doing it once a month. So when people were taking the next steps, they were only taking the next steps. Maybe or they took a quick couple of steps right before the meeting to make sure they got those tasks done before they had that coaching session with me. And then maybe they'll do something straight after, but then there was like 3 weeks of nothing in between. I looked at that and I was like, well, hang on a sec. This hasn't been that effective. If all the magic happens in the last 10 minutes of my coaching sessions, I'm now going to make all my coaching sessions 15 minutes long. So I changed my whole coaching business now to just do weekly 15-minute sessions. And yes, there's preparation prior to that. There's preparation
Right,
where they fill in like a form and they answer some questions
right,
prior. We hit that meeting.
right,
We hit that meeting hot. It's gone straight into it.
right,
Yes, we've got some nice hits at the beginning, but it's right. I saw it in that form that you filled in, that the obstacles that you had this, and this obstacle. I saw that you didn't win the week here, and I saw that your health, sleep, and fitness was a bit down. Right. Let's talk about those things specifically. All right. Let's put some routines in place, some habits in place. We can do all that in 15 minutes because
right,
we've got that first of all pre-preparation, but we've gone into it with the outset is that this 15 minutes is for us to look at the lessons from last week, take the learnings, and work out how we're going to do better next week. So
right,
shaping
right.
that
So
from that 1 hour down to those 15 minutes, I just did an 80-20 on it. That's all I did. But it's been incredibly effective. Now, how can we apply that sort of stuff to these standard hour meetings?
when
It's just
you
having that question.
you use metrics,
Yep.
you came from a mindset of respect. It sounds like you went
Mm-hmm.
through an improvement cycle
Yep.
in order to, and you were committed to, you had a commitment in mind, whether it's respect, dollars, or time, or all three. It sounds like maybe
Yep.
that
Yep.
you wanted to craft a solution that gave you the same result, use less time, and the person would feel as if you are trying harder than you were before. Because as you said, you started off hot
Yeah.
because you had to do some
Yeah.
preparation. So
That's right.
you ever heard these stories of Amazon, how they spend the first 20 minutes of a meeting, everybody quietly reading the meeting preparation notes?
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So,
Yeah.
so there's no talking. They don't allow any conversation for the 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But they want to know that when they start the meeting on the 21st minute, that the meeting starts hot, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because having the meeting start hot strikes me as a kind of it's a proxy for what we had said was respect.
Yeah.
I respect your
That's
time
right.
so much that I'm arranging it so that the 15 minutes starts off with us already
Mhm.
moving. You don't take
Yep.
15 minutes to how's the dog, what's the weather
No.
like over there,
No.
and how. We,
That's
we
right.
we get all that, cut that all of that out. We
Yep.
do the preparation so that minutes 1 through 15 really count.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we had that very clear outcome of what we're trying to do here in this meeting. We're trying to set up and make sure we improve upon the previous week, and we're adding new steps in place, or we're focusing on taking those lessons forward and doing better the week after. And that just the outcome that I use in my coaching, right? But if you've got specific outcomes in your meetings, you can certainly be implementing them in that way as well, and setting them up with that pre-reading beforehand, or setting them up with that form beforehand, or any of those sort of things. Using technology to support it is super, super important. But it is also, though, we come into this with the idea of incremental improvement. We come into this with the idea of being better at our meetings. I did the 80-20. I had this idea of always wanting to improve. I think
And I think that's
so many
the
people aren't having that mindset when they come into it. They're not thinking about trying to improve their meetings. They're not trying to think about being more efficient. They're not trying to think about having more respectful minutes.
I-
So they're not
I-
able to
you
just
sound,
distance themselves or think of it from that side of the picture.
it almost sounds as if you have that meeting as a sport. The way you're passionate about it, it's almost as if how people get passionate about sports, about
Yeah,
football, soccer,
100%.
Australian rules, football,
Yeah,
cricket,
yeah,
baseball, basketball. They get really passionate,
yeah.
and they narrow down, and they dive all the way down into the ways to make it better, right? They're
Yeah, and you
trying
can have
to
energy for 15
forge
minutes.
improvements,
If
and you can
if
have
if you
high
if
energy
if
for
we make
15
our
minutes.
meetings, yeah, if we make our meetings shorter, people can be more engaged, they can be more energetic. They can actually
Right.
enjoy
Bring
being
more to the
there.
party,
It's like,
prepare,
oh,
get
I'm gonna
themselves in
have
the
to
right
go.
frame of mind,
Yeah,
do the right homework, so that the first
100%.
minute is a high quality minute as opposed to kind
Yeah,
of. Maybe that's the big thing that we want to leave our listeners with, because we're going to wrap up. Is that
yeah,
if there's no measurement going on, then you're not serious. It's like if you're not
yep,
actively trying to make things better and using
mm,
measurements and numbers to do
mm,
so, then guess what? You're not even in the game. You're not in the real game of improving your meetings. You may be in the game of complaining about how bad they are,
mm,
but that's not what we're talking about. The game that you're describing is an improvement game, because there's certain
yep,
ways in which humans engage in games that matter to them.
yep,
And
and
if
it's an
this
outcome
game
game.
of meetings,
Yep,
it's an outcome game, and you're
yep,
always looking to measure the right things, to change the way you view it, to have every minute count, to start hot,
yep,
to have continuous improvement, so that if you're not scoring more points, you're improving the disrespect to respect ratio, or you're taking less
mm,
time, or that big thing that tells you how many dollars you're spending per meeting is going
yep,
down. So at the
yep,
end of the year or the quarter or whatever, you're able to say, hey, look what I'm doing. Look,
yeah,
I'm actually moving the needle here. And so if those things aren't where you're headed in improving your meetings, then arguably you're not improving your meetings. You're just talking about improving your meetings, because nothing is really happening. Unfortunately, that's 99% of the companies I've ever, they're not serious.
yeah,
They
yeah,
complain, but there's
yeah.
not serious effort the way we try to put a ball through the uprights in American football or Australian football. I don't want.
Yeah, that's right. I think just most people just aren't really reflecting on it. They're making the complaints. They're saying this is too long. They're saying these are boring. They're saying this and that. But and not enough people are really reflecting on it, whether it's a daily or weekly basis, on how can we actually be improving this.
Right.
This is just the way it's always been done. This is the way it's always been done. Going back to Kodak, right? This is the way it's always been done. This is the way it's always going to be done. Just get on board. It's not going to change. And no one's trying to change it. No one's trying to reflect as, oh, maybe there's a better way we can do this. And I hopefully that, through this discussion, people are now thinking, oh, maybe, and if they're bosses, if they're senior managers or if they're CEOs, business owners are thinking, okay, well, maybe there are some ways that I can improve my meetings. I can be more efficient. How do I ask myself these questions when I'm setting a meeting? How can we track this? And so I think that's the most important part of this is people are just doing this BAU thing. It is the way it is. It is the 9 to 5. We have 4 meetings every day and they're just accepting it. And we should not accept mediocrity, being stagnant and not improving. We should be always reflecting and always seeing what can we do to make this better.
Right. Ben, where can folks get a hold of you and learn more about the work that you do?
Yeah, thanks. So wintheday.com.au is my website. There is that .au at the end there for Australia, of course. And we will have a special link in there as well, which will sort of be a bit of a landing page really for free download of my ebook, a few templates, a few productivity templates, those sort of things. But the most important thing is, hey, book a call with me and let's have a chat. Let's talk about your schedule, your meetings, those sort of things. I don't charge for those calls, and it's just a way for me to sort of get to know my people better as well. People that are in the same space as myself, mental space, physical space, as far as on this side of the world. So you can book a call, we'll have a chat. It's not salesy or anything. I just want to get to know people, and maybe we can even solve a few problems. So wintheday.com.au and LinkedIn, of course.
Don't miss out on an opportunity to connect with Ben directly. He's really easy to contact and he'll respond. I can tell you from experience. So keep listening because I want to tell you about our next episode. And there's a bit more to come. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
And if you want to leave a comment about this episode or any aspect of the work that we're doing here at the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast, you can go over to www.replytofrancis.info and send me either a message by text or send me a voice message, a voice note. And as you probably know, we have a couple of places that you can interact with other people, talk about this episode. One is at the community mightytaskers.scheduleu.org, and you'll see the link in the show notes. And the other, of course, is our upcoming Task Management and Time Blocking Summit coming up in March. 2 outstanding opportunities to interact with other people about the ideas that you've heard on this podcast or any of our episodes that are coming up. And if you'd like to support the work we're doing, I invite you to click on the Patreon link below to make a donation. And please don't forget to like our show and recommend it to others on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, or whatever podcast app or service you're using. This is Francis Wade. I'm signing out. I hope to see you on a future episode. And until then, take care and all the best. See you later.